Under 500 bucks, I can't think of any IEM that hits this hard. Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review. And today we're taking a look at the Hisenior Caño Cristales. This is a hybrid IEM, 2 dynamic drivers, 8 balanced armatures at a price of $400 US. And that is like almost meme levels of drivers in each earpiece. But, well, it's from Hisenior, and they're the company that brought us the Mega5-EST. And so, well, Hisenior is definitely not a joke, but interestingly, this is definitely not a Mega5-EST. So the Mega5-EST was kind of known for its very neutral, warm sound signature, whereas what we have here, this is part of what they call their, I'm looking at it on the box here, their Wild Nature series of headphones. What that means is it's definitely not going for a neutral sound signature. In fact, I think that the bass in this thing is the star of the show, and frankly, pretty standout at the price. And I guess we're going to talk about exactly why. But before we get to that, a quick shout out to Hisenior for sending this IEM in for review. If you want to check out the Caño Cristales or anything else we talk about today, of course, I'll have it linked in the description down below. But with that said, let's go back to the table. We're going to start with the box, which you get inside the box, which is a lot of accessories, especially at the $400 price point, actually. And then, of course, we'll talk about build quality, fit and comfort, all that stuff. And then, we'll dive into the sound here in the Caño Cristales, which is, frankly, what I think is actually pretty standout and interesting about this IEM. So let's start. Okay, here is the box. Here's the packaging. You can see it is too large for me to fit on my screen, but you get the idea. I guess just a quick note on this name, Caño Cristales, what that is. It's like, I had to look it up. It wasn't something I was aware of before, but it is a really cool looking river in Colombia. Let me actually pull up a picture of it real quick just to show you. Like, this is what this river looks like in Colombia, which I think makes a lot of sense why this IEM looks the way it does, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Because to start with, we're gonna just go over the accessories that you get here with the Caño Cristales, including this little carry case, which is nice. Again, larger than something you're likely to put in your pocket, but for something that you're gonna put on a shelf on your coffee table or something like that, this is a nice little carry case. It's soft inside, you can see, and it has a little clasp to hold it closed. I think they even described it as being made of sheepskin, which is kind of nice, but we'll put that to the side for now. You do also get a little snap thing to hold your cable together. Not something I use personally, but it's a nice little touch. The other things that are, maybe I'm not going to be using, but are also a nice little touch, it's got a shirt clip for all you shirt clip enthusiasts. I'm still not exactly sure how to use one of these. Somebody told me I could figure it out, and I think you're probably right. I probably could figure it out, but I still haven't, so we'll leave that to the side for now. You do get a microfiber towel. I use these things all the time. Not necessarily on IEMs. I guess sometimes on IEMs, but it's always nice to have a nice microfiber towel. And this one is branded Phoebos. If you're confused about what Phoebos means, this is like Hisenior's slogan. It stands for Feel the Beauty of Sound. Yep. And what else do we get? Okay, we'll talk about this stuff in a little bit. Let me talk about these ear tips, because you get a ton of ear tips with this, which I am all about. Now, I'm not using any of these ear tips because I went with my own ear tips, but it's still nice to see that they include so many different styles of ear tips. So here's 2 different styles of silicone ear tips in small, medium, and large. There are 3 more styles of silicone ear tips in this bag, including like actually pretty different fitting styles, which I think is important. I'm sorry to beat this horse, but when you get a new IEM, I recommend just spending time finding the right ear tip that matches your ear. And it's not going to be the same ear tip for every IEM. It's not going to be the same, it's not going to be necessarily the stuff that comes inside the box, but having all these different ear tips come with it, including a set of foams here, just makes it more likely that you're going to find the right fit with the stuff that comes in the box. And I think that is fantastic. I was going to say, just having different shapes is going to make a big difference in terms of the fit. And the fit stuff can also impact the sound. So very nice to see. Apart from that, you get the IEM and the cable. So we will dive into talking about the build quality on this IEM. I guess maybe before we get into the nitty-gritty of the build quality, just to highlight that it does come with a swappable termination on the cable. So it's got the nice screw retention mechanism, which I like to see, holds it in there and make sure it doesn't fall off. And also, this is not adding a lot of bulk to the termination. So I dig this, but it does come with, of course, balanced connectors for all you balance people. Interestingly, you get a 4.4 mil balance, and I've got these little covers. I haven't even pulled these off. That's how much I don't use balance connectors. But it comes with a 4.4 as well as a 2.5 mil balance termination. it's been a while since I've seen one of these. In fact, with these these updated, I feel like since we've kind of moved on to this type of swappable termination, the 2.5 has basically been dead. So if you're looking for a swappable 2.5 mil, well, here you go. That might be the first time I've seen it. Might not also be. I just don't remember. But anyway, let's talk about the rest of this cable, which is, I'm kind of mixed opinions about it. There are things about this cable that I should not like, all right? It's a little bit on the stiff side, which you might see. It's also a little kink prone, so I'll just give it a little kink and just kind of show you that it holds its position right there. So like when I fall asleep with this IEM, which I've done a couple of times, and I wake up in the morning and I've moved around in bed, this thing is just in all kinds of tatters and crinkly and just kind of nasty looking. But as you kind of saw, like it just works itself back out. So it's not like a permanent disfigurement. So I can kind of forgive that. But what I do kind of like about this cable is just the way that it behaves and the way that it wraps, I guess, especially. It also looks nice. I like that it is a silver cable, not the most common color, so I dig that. And as you can see, I'll just give it a little rotary wrap and you can see how just tidy it snugs together and sits on a table. Like, look at that. It just wants to sit there and look good. And I like that. Like it's kind of what I'm all about with the cables, to be honest. So I actually do kind of like this cable, again, even though there are some things about it that maybe I shouldn't like. But anyway, I do like the hardware on it, nice and small. We already talked about the termination down here being small. Y-split, also quite small. It does have a chin slider, and it's not the most secure, as I feel like this feels like the simplest thing to get right, but almost nobody is doing very good chin sliders. So it does stay in place well enough because I guess the notchiness of this cable, like it's so kind of like thick and braided, that it ends up holding itself in place reasonably well. But you can also see that like it'll work itself out if you're just kind of handling the cable. But apart from that, I know I talk about chin sliders probably way too much. Of course, you do have your preformed ear hooks up top and a standard 2-pin connector with a very mild protrusion on the end, because on the IEM itself there is no recess in the 2-pin connector. It's just a flat. So that just means that basically any 2-pin connector or any 2-pin cable will work well on this IEM, and this cable will probably work on most IEMs, but if you have an IEM that has like a really recessed connector, it might not reach all the way. Okay, let's talk about these earpieces, which aesthetically I was on the, well, okay, aesthetically I didn't love them initially. I thought that looks interesting. It almost looks a little like child's painting like, which kind of reminded me of a lot of stuff I see on Pinon Audio's website. But so initially I didn't love it, but then I saw those pictures, let's go back to it, of the Caño Cristales River. I'm like, okay, well that kind of checks out. That kind of makes sense why this thing has these, I don't know, pretty bold colors on it, which overall, I would say this is definitely not my ideal aesthetic, but there's something about it that actually does work pretty well for me. It's got, of course, you know, the name of it, Caño Cristales, written in there with a pretty bold, almost looks like a handwriting font in yellow, which again is just like so not what I would normally go for, but I feel like it does kind of work here. What really does work for me, however, is on the back side of it, you have this translucent acrylic shell. You can see all the drivers inside of it. And like I mentioned, there are a lot of drivers in here. 2 dynamic drivers, 8 balanced armatures, and the earpieces are not that large. I'll show you what it looks like in terms of fit and comfort in a bit. I mean, it's probably like a medium large, so it's not that compact also, but it's definitely smaller than a lot of other IEMs, and it fits me better than most IEMs that have this many drivers. But yeah, I love being able to see the drivers in there, all the balanced armatures up here lined up. And here you can see like the back of the dynamic driver at one of them. They're kind of like stacked up on top of each other. And yeah, this is the kind of thing that does it for me. I love being able to see the drivers, seeing the light come through it. And it's just, it's coming through a purple, which is pretty unique. So overall, aesthetically, I'm gonna give it like three stars. Mostly I actually kind of like it. But anyway, I don't usually give stars to the IEMs for the aesthetics, but I felt compelled here with this one. Apart from that, okay, in terms of build quality, like the weight on them is actually, they've got a little decent bit of weight to them, unlike some other hollow shelled IEMs like this. It does feel like it's got, it feels well put together. It doesn't feel overly plasticky or anything like that. Now let's talk about fit and comfort, which I already described this as being kind of like medium large in terms of its size. You can see that the shape on it is semi-custom molded, which is, you know, kind of what I come to expect from Hisenior stuff. And here's how it fits inside my ear. So let me show you. You might have noticed the ear tip on it. Actually, I didn't highlight it. I'm not using any of the stock ear tips. I'm using, this is a NF Audio MS42 ear tip, which is just a very, very short ear tip. Like it fits very close to the end of the nozzle. Because again, this is kind of a medium large fitting IEM that just kind of shrinks up the overall package and makes it work better on my ear. So it does end up fitting quite nicely. It fills up the volume of my concha. You can see that it is giving me a little bit of these little scrunchy wrinkles in here because it is taking up a decent amount of space there, but I generally find it to fit comfortable. It's very stable. And I mentioned, you know, wearing this thing to bed. This is the type of IEM that will stay put in my ear all night, which is good. And again, that's kind of like my stress test of the fit of an IEM. I'm not a stage performer, so I'm not on stage doing stage things and figuring out how well these things stay in my ear. I'm doing the opposite of that, and I am sleeping aggressively. I'm actually a pretty still sleeper. But anyway, yeah, generally, I actually like the build quality on this IEM, despite the fact that it just kind of, I don't know, again, it gives me, what is the term? What's the name of the thread? It gives me, oh my gosh, Head-Fi water cooler thread vibes. I'll just say that. It gives me water cooler thread vibes. But overall, I ended up kind of liking it, especially at the price at $400. Like the water cooler, if you're not familiar, they go hard on a lot of IEMs that cost $1,000 plus, $2,000, $5,000 plus, and some of them are kind of goofy looking. I'll be honest. This one's kind of goofy looking also, but not as goofy looking as some of those. And yeah, $400. I don't know, maybe I just kind of feel good getting a goofy looking IEM for $400 and not having to spend $2,000 on it. But anyway, that is enough talking about how this IEM looks. Let's talk about how it sounds. I'm gonna pull up the frequency response graph. We're gonna go to SquigLink. This is up on SquigLink, of course. If you wanna check this graph out for yourself, compare it to literally hundreds of other IEMs that I've measured on my rig. But of course, we'll talk about it together here. And I think this graph does a pretty decent job of giving you an idea of the tonality of this IEM. Again, this is definitely not a neutral IEM like you might expect from the Hisenior Mega5-EST. This is wild nature, guys. And the wild nature really is expressed down here. This is a lot of bass on this IEM, and you probably know that I'm not usually the kind of guy that gravitates towards having a lot of bass. In fact, I see that amount of bass, right? Like here's my neutral target, right? This darker dotted line back here. This is what sounds like, yeah, roughly neutral, and like I'm happy with this amount of bass. This lighter dotted line, this is the Harman target, which has a fairly boosted sub bass, maybe a little bit lean in the mid bass. But then you look at the Caño Cristales, and this is like 5 dB above Harman in a number of places, which is a lot of bass. This is a lot of bass. Now, counterbalancing that, I would say through the mid-range, like this looks more or less Harman. In fact, even through here, through the lower treble, it's kind of Harmonish, right? You can see that there's maybe a little bit of unevenness here in the upper mid-range kind of presence region, but it never really goes past being Harman levels of brightness in that lower treble. So you do get a little bit of brightness in that lower treble. It gives it kind of this exciting, let's say contrasty sound signature, but then it's also kind of counterbalanced by gobs of bass. And then you see that the upper treble is actually pretty relaxed here on this IEM. So overall, what I would say you should expect from the sound here in the Caño Cristales is definitely expect it to be bassy, but also expect it to be fairly contrasty. Like it has like a bright liveliness to it. In fact, when this was introduced to me by Hisenior, they mentioned that this IEM was targeted specifically at, I guess, Asian markets that tend to like brighter sound signatures. At least that was the characterization they were giving. And basically kind of warned me that like, okay, a lot of Western reviewers don't really like this IEM because it's too bright. Here's what I'm gonna say. I don't know that it is definitely bright in that it's contrasty, but you look at all that bass, this is kind of balancing it out. And it does end up sounding kind of V-shaped. But this bass right here, we're gonna talk about that. So let me pull up my notes real quick and return us to looking at the Caño Cristales, and we'll tell you how this thing actually just sounds in my ear, my kind of subjective listening impression. So that lower treble that I described, again, I think it's kind of like roughly harmonish in its forwardness, which can be a little bit on the bright, a little bit on the edgy side, but it ends up being kind of counterbalanced by the bass, so I actually don't hear it as particularly sharp. Like, it's contrasty, but actually fairly well balanced given the level of bass that we have there. I would say that the timbre is generally mostly right. It's a pretty incisive sounding IEM without being sharp in the treble. Like, I don't have any issues with sibilants, hi-hats and stuff like that. They don't sound splashy or over-exaggerated. In fact, again, the upper treble was a little bit on the muted side. Well, I won't say muted, but it's very tame in the upper treble. And well, because of that, I feel like the hi-hats and stuff, again, they don't sound splashy, but they do have a good sense of that metallic ping and sounding nice and transparent and realistic. So I dig that. So yeah, I don't know, as far as like the treble being harsh, I don't get any of that. But then you do get the bass. And let's talk about the bass, because the bass on this IEM, I already said it early, it hits hard. I know there's a lot of IEMs out there with a lot of bass. In fact, we're gonna pull in some others, including another one from Hisenior. This is the Mega5-EST Bass Plus edition. But we're gonna make that comparison in a little bit later, because I just wanna talk about this. The bass on this is like not like a thick, bloated, boomy, kind of boxy type of bass. It really is like super incisive. It's sharp, it's well-defined, and it hits hard. It digs deep, so you get nice sub-bass tones coming through it, and you just get a lot of physicality out of this bass. In fact, the IEM that first came to mind, like I was trying to think, well, okay, what can I compare this to in this review? And really struggling to think of anything under 500 bucks that has bass like this. And in fact, I can't think of many IEMs that have bass like this, which is not to say that this is necessarily my favorite bass, because it's an aggressive, very much in your face kind of bass presentation, but it's also, again, well defined, and you get that tactility out of the bass. It doesn't sound smudgy and kludgy the way that you might expect with that amount of bass. And again, what was I thinking of? The thing that it reminded me the most of actually was like the Thea Audio Origin, which is, I don't know, it was like an $800 IEM or something like that. I don't think this is quite as overboard as the bass on the Origin. So if you're looking for an Origin at half the price, it's not exactly the same. But I think if you're looking for that kind of bass and you don't want to spend that kind of money, I can't think of anything that gets closer than the Caño Cristales. In fact, I would say that the bass here is actually even a little bit better defined than the bass on the Origin, where the Origin's bass kind of just gets to like almost like atmospheric levels of exaggerated. It does hit hard, but it also gets a little bit just like weirdly cloudy. I feel like the bass here never really does that. This bass is like down to earth and well, definitely aggressive. So yeah, it's kind of epic bass, very bombastic sound. And again, at 400 bucks, I can't think of anything that hits this hard. But how does it compare to some other IEMs? Well, I've already teased this one, so we'll talk about this. This is the Hisenior Mega5-EST Bass Plus edition. How have I got this thing wrapped up? How have I done that? Anyway, so this was basically the Mega5-EST, which was a neutral tuned IEM that had, frankly, probably too much bass the way that it was tuned, a little bit on the smeary, bloaty side. And then they just added a lot more bass to it. So if you look at the frequency response graph, you might think that, well, this is basically just kind of similar levels of bass. So they probably have similar characteristics. But I think listening to these things combined or next to each other, you'll realize that there's a big difference in the execution of the bass. This is slow, sludgy. It just sounds smeary. It doesn't sound well defined. It is a lot of bass for sure, but this is like what I don't want in a lot of bass. Whereas over here in the Caño Cristales, this is an exciting, engaging, punchy, well-defined bass that just, it hits hard, like it smacks you in a way that it's, okay, it's aggressive, but I was able to fall asleep with it, so maybe it's not too aggressive. It's gonna depend on what you're listening to, of course. That's actually a good thing just to kind of remember. A lot of people looking for the best bass, and then they're just listening to music that has, most music has bad bass. If you want great bass, you gotta find the right music, and then maybe you don't need so much bass. But if you've got the right music and you still want more bass, well, of these two, the Caño Cristales is definitely what I would go for. Now, For the rest of the frequency response, I don't know that I could even necessarily give this a win in terms of like sounding more neutral, natural. It's definitely less contrasty. This comes across more V-shaped, whereas this just comes across as low contrast and kind of smeared up by the bass. I don't know. The bass just kind of ruins this IEM, but maybe that's enough of me harping on the bass of this particular IEM. Let me pull in another IEM that is actually closer in price, because I forget what I think the Mega5-EST plus bass was like a $600 IEM. Whereas here we've got the Moondrop Cross Critical Dusk, also around 400 bucks. So very similar in terms of price, but very different in terms of sound signature. Where I am gonna draw some similarities is in terms of the bass physicality, because that is what I love about the Dusk, is the bass physicality is just stand out. It is not a lot of bass. I mean, it's definitely a boosted bass, but it's more sub-bass oriented, and it just has a really nice satisfying snap and attack on it, where you can listen to the rest of the frequency response. You can get that nice clean mid-range, much more of a mid-range focused sound signature over here on the Dusk versus this, which is going to be more V-shaped, more aggressive in the bass. But you still get some of that physicality in the bass, which is why I love this IEM. This one has kind of a similar level of physicality in the bass. It's just kind of dialed up to 11. And definitely this is much more about the bass. In terms of like, which one am I gonna daily drive? It's still gonna be the Dusk, because I still prefer more of a mid-range focus sound signature, really gonna pull out all the resolution and transparency in a vocal. But the Cristales doesn't do a bad job of that, to be honest. It's just a very aggressive sound. So not exactly the sort of thing that you just kind of like, soak up the music into. You basically get the music kind of pounded into you with this one, and it could be kind of fun. But the last IEM I want to bring in, again, I was kind of struggling to think of IEMs at this price point that do bass even reasonably nearly this well. This is the Dunu DK3001 BD, aka the Brain Dance. Price on this is actually more expensive. It's 500 bucks. And frankly, it's just not nearly as much bass as what you get here on the Cristales. So this is kind of like not the best comparison. This is still nonetheless, though, I would say this is kind of like an exciting tune of an IEM, whereas this is like Hisenior's, again, their wild nature. I think Dunu described this as like their hyper tuning series. So this is kind of like Dunu's same tact, I guess. It's like, okay, we've got our neutral IEMs, and then we've got our exciting ones. So okay, there is some similarities here. And the BD is definitely an exciting sounding IEM. But in terms of the bass performance, it's definitely gonna be more sub-bass oriented here on the Brain Dance, which just means that you're not gonna get nearly as much of that punch and that incisiveness in the bass that you get here with the Cristales. I think the bass is very well done here on the Brain Dance. It's just gonna be just a lot less aggressive in terms of its tact. Like, it's just not gonna hit you over the head. It's very satisfying, and it's definitely a boosted bass. But again, it just leaves a lot more room for the mid-range to breathe. So this does end up being more of a mid-range focused sound signature. I think overall this is the brighter sound signature of the two as well. And maybe this one comes across as a little bit more like stagey, and the imaging is more exaggerated. It's a little bit more exciting in terms of the sort of like technical descriptors. But the Cristales is frankly no slouch in those regards. I think like this does a really good job of imaging, like I would say probably above average. And I don't know, if I'm making the decision between these two, I'm still gonna go for the Brain Dance personally, because I just love the presentation of this and the vocal representation. Listening to Cigarettes After Sex on both of these is actually pretty nice, but on the Brain Dance, it is a next level above. But of course, if you're looking for just that bass dominance, you probably actually will prefer the Cristales yourself. So I think that will do it for my thoughts here on the Caño Cristales. Let me just check my notes. Yeah, nothing else I can think of to say. So out of 5 stars, we're gonna give the Caño Cristales 4 stars. At 500 bucks, if you're looking for, and it's only $400, but if you're looking for just like the most aggressive, assertive, kind of impressive bass presentation, I can't think of anything that I would recommend above the Caño Cristales. So if you want to check it out, I've got it linked in the description down below. And with that said, or while you're down there, that's my transition. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, join me on Discord, also linked in the description, and I'll catch you in the next super review. Cheers.
Joined with the force of reviews, we now have the tools to brave the misleading world of audio fools. Hey, this review is super, and so are you. Grab your headphones, sniff a graph, and share your thoughts in this pursuit. Let's get into the pitch.